Everyone, my name is Josh and this is Coin Interesting Musings, and today I have a book review for you on, drumroll please, The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. And this is the sequel to J.K. Rowling's runaway hit, The Cuckoo's Calling, of 2013. This takes place in 2014, literally a year after the events of the first book. So for those of you who don't know, the Cormoran Strike series is a detective series written by J.K. Rowling under the pseudonym of Robert Galbraith. She pretty much did this after the success of The Casual Vacancy, or the kind of mixed reception from The Casual Vacancy wasn't really up to standard. So she decided to write a detective series under a pen name if she was going to continue to write for adults. And she even said for the longest time, before she even wrote books like The Casual Vacancy, or even while she was writing the Harry Potter books, she said that she's always loved the crime genre. She's always, been a huge fan of the works of Agatha Christie, P.D. James, and Marjorie Allingham, just to name a few. And if you look at the Harry Potter books very carefully, they are basically fantasy stories, or whodunit stories disguised as fantasy stories. And if you look at those books very carefully, you definitely can see elements of a mystery, especially with the first two books, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So the first book of The Cuckoo's Calling basically follows our detective duo, Cormoran Strike, a war veteran who has had his leg blown off in the war and he's had to take early retirement. He's basically retired to being a private detective. So he works at this agency, and in the first book he's so poor that he literally has no other means of accommodation. He literally just has to live in his office. He has a ton of debts to pay, and he has no way of doing so because no one will hire him for any particular work. So when the case of Lula Landry comes knocking, he takes the job even though he's financially strapped. And he manages to solve the case, and I'm not going to reveal who the killer is in that particular installment because you have to read the book for yourself in order to find out. But he does succeed in capturing this killer, and he ends up, solving the case, and that gives him a bit of recognition. So now his agency is booming, and now Robin is now his secretary still, but she still has input on the cases, and she still has a very vital role to play in Strike solving said cases. So in this book, The Silkworm, after doing some undercover work for an unknown source, he ends up, going back to his office, and because his work is so busy, he can now pick and choose what cases he decides to do. Like, he can do surveillance work for certain, upper class types if they're willing to pay well. He can do celebrity work or something like that, or try to uncover scandals or something along those lines. But for the most part, he tries to keep his sights on, trying to uncover shady business dealings, trying to cover infidelity, or trying to solve murders. And in this particular book, it starts off as a missing persons case. A woman who claims to be the wife of a very successful novelist who is basically coming to the office to basically say that her husband, Owen Quine, is missing. But when she decides to pay him, she says that, he might have gone to this writer's retreat, but he hasn't returned back. He usually goes there for a week. So she begins to think that something is up. So she calls Cormoran Strike to investigate. And this leads them into the world of the publishing industry. And I'm going to go off on a brief tangent. In the Cormoran Strike novels, what's really great about them, aside from your average detective story or your average police procedural, is because Cormoran Strike is a private detective, he is allowed to go into very private worlds, like the world of the fashion industry, or very public communities, or very public, industries like the fashion industry, or in this case, the publishing industry. And he has access to information that even the police don't get access to in various different circumstances. Excuse me. So Cormoran Strike is allowed to go into the publishing industry and get access to various different things, including a unofficial manuscript for a novel that Owen Quine was writing before the time of his disappearance, and it was called Bombix Mori, which is supposed to be a very detailed manuscript, kind of writing these very toxic and very kind of almost disgusting and disturbing portraits of people in the publishing industry, and every character in the novel has some kind of likeliness or real world likeliness to the people whom they're meant to be satirizing or caricaturing. And this has made a lot of people very angry. And of course, people will say that if this book gets published, it will literally ruin the publishing house that it's featured. Like, people often say, oh, this is the guy from that novel that weirdo wrote, and things like that. So there's a lot of things going on in that regard. But what makes this novel so interesting and so compelling is, again, the Cormoran Strike novel sets itself apart from in any other detective drama or any other detective story, because Cormoran is a private detective and he gets invited into these worlds. He isn't necessarily investigating them off the bat, and he's kind of on the sidelines, kind of trying to look in. It's literally a world that he's invited into, and I really do like the fact that he has that opportunity, because then he gets to get away with a lot more things that even most general police officers in these procedurals won't be able to get away with, unless of course you're Luther. But yeah, we don't talk about Luther yet because I'm saving that for its own review. But yeah, I will be doing that. But yeah, I really do love this book series. I love the character of Cormoran Strike. I love the character of Robin Ellicott. I think they're all fantastic main characters. I like the story. I like the fact that it's to do with the publishing industry, but I like how darker this one is in comparison to the previous one, because even though the previous one was dark and it had some very upsetting sequences, I felt like the Silkworm took it a step further and basically said, well, okay, you thought the first one was messed up? Well, we're going to go even further this time. Because while Strike is investigating an anonymous address, he finds the remains of Owen Quine. And he's not looking himself. He's actually been horrifically mutilated. He's been gutted, and he has literally had his intestines removed, in the manner pretty much akin to the Silkworm of Bombix Mori. And that's basically the whole entire thing. There's a lot of comparisons between the manuscript and some of the details of the death, the ritualistic death in the manner of how Owen Quine was killed. So this could bring, Strike to the conclusion that someone who read the manuscript obviously didn't like it and wanted him dead. Through a lot of twists and turns, Cormoran Strike is able to get to the bottom of what really happened. And I'm going to stop there, because people who haven't read the book should pick this book up and read it for themselves. And if you're worried about, should I read The Cuckoo's Calling first or The Silkworm, I would definitely say read The Cuckoo's Calling first if you can get your hands on a copy, but I would definitely say you can still read this without having read the first book. Even though it is the second book in a series, it does often function in a standalone capacity, even though there are references to various other aspects in the original book. So it can work as a standalone in its own way, but then you also have to read the first book in order to get the full context and the full introduction of the characters, and to appreciate the jump from him being in poverty, literally living in his office, to him having all these different cases and getting slightly famous. So I'm actually going to break away from the structure of actually describing the plot, because I do actually want people to read these books. They're fantastic. And I'm actually going to get on point with the characters. The first character I'm going to talk about is Cormoran. He pretty much is in an interesting place in this book compared to where he was in the last one. Like I said, he was pretty much, living in his office when he was in the first book, and he literally had no money between him. He was literally officially bankrupt. So the fact that he's gone from that to being slightly successful, or even onto the point of being famous, is actually quite an interesting jump. But in the first book, he came away from having quite a very bad relationship with a woman called Charlotte Campbell, who I have to say is a total bitch. She is absolutely horrendous. She is awful. She is a parasite in every sense of the word. She is a character who didn't even want to know him when he was on his arse in poverty, literally living in his office. She called him a loser. She said no one would want him. He's awful. But then as soon as he gets famous, she starts to ring him and she starts to call him his pet name, Bluey. And I thought, you really are so low that you will literally crawl back to him in order to kind of, say, oh, I'm related to a famous person, or oh, I used to date a famous person kind of thing. And I thought, you're so full of crap, Charlotte. You're so full of crap character. And I hated her so much in this book. She was horrendous. I hated Charlotte. Do I hate Matthew as much as Charlotte? And for those of you who don't know, Matthew is in fact Robin's fiance. I do, because he is a bit of a judgmental asshole as well. He basically judges Cormoran Strike the second the second Robin tells Matthew about Cormoran Strike and his situation. He immediately judges him and says, "Oh, he's living in his office, is he? Or oh, he's doing this. He's doing detective work, is he? How's that going to pay the bills? Or how's that going to make you successful and build an income?" Like he's throwing all these previously conceived ideas, and I just thought, shut up, Matthew. You have no idea what he's going through or he's had to go through and all that stuff. So I immediately hated Matthew, and a lot of people kind of share my sentiment, including J.K. Rowling herself. She literally said, "I don't like Matthew," and I'm so happy that she did, because honestly, I thought that I'd have to pretend to like him at least, but no, I didn't like him at all. He's very judgmental. He's very kind of full of himself. He's a rugby player, and he really kind of, he's a rugby player, and he, just likes to keep himself fit. He's very kind of arrogant and egotistical. He kind of reminds me of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. He kind of gives me that image, but when I saw him in the TV adaptation, I was like, oh, he's kind of a little bit more skinnier than a rugby player, than I'd imagine a rugby player being, because I'd imagine them being quite muscly and big and huge. But yeah, apparently he's very kind of a lot more smaller than I imagined him being. And I actually made that comment when I watched the film, the TV adaptation of The Cuckoo's Calling. I thought, oh, you're a little bit more smaller than I thought you would be, Matthew. Maybe the actor just couldn't be bothered to get into shape to play the role, but I think he was supposed to be a lot bigger than he actually was. But yeah, I don't like Matthew. He's a really judgmental arsehole, and I really don't like him. But yeah, I don't like any of the love interests, the people outside of Robin and Corm's circle. I don't really like that much. And I really did enjoy the mystery. This one has a lot more twists and turns than the original one. The original one has a very straight line in regards to where the mystery starts and where it ends. And it's kind of operating under the form of, continuous quantities. Like, you could add so many detours to this plot, to the plot of Cuckoo's Calling, that is, and then you could pretty much still have that straight line, and you could still go from one place to the other. You could still go from one outcome to the next, A to B, without any real interruptions, even though there are all these detours. And in the Silkworm, it's a completely different ball game. There's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of red herrings. One of the big clues that is key to solving this mystery is the intestines, when Owen Quine was mutilated, was taken, and they need to figure out where the intestines went. And one of the red herrings was to do with a pop star by the name of Jonathan North, who was an American who was in the UK, but he sadly died of a drug overdose. But there was a location where he used to live, in sort of that area, where a statue was going to be planted. So I thought maybe the intestines were going to be buried there in the cement to try to cover, so the killer could try to cover their tracks. But chances are that was never the case. So there's a lot of different clues in this particular novel that really do kind of hint at where this particular mystery could go, and there's a lot of twists and there's a lot of turns. And there was definitely one that happens in page 13, I want to say, that I definitely thought that was brilliant. I thought that was such a good twist, that was such a good, a good kind of misdirect. It was a very Inside Number 9 plot twist, where what do you think you're reading and what are you actually reading, kind of thing. It kind of gave me that flavour, and of course, because it's to do with the main characters reading a manuscript of Bombix Mori, of a yet unpublished novel, it really does become quite literal. Like, what do you think you're reading compared to what are you actually reading? And that's actually a very compelling plot twist. And I have to say, J.K. Rowling is a master storyteller. She knows how to really kind of incorporate all these wonderful clues, really kind of make you feel misdirected, and make you go back on yourself and make you second guess yourself and go, oh, I thought it was this person, but maybe it could be this person because of this, that, and the other. And that's a genius move. Any person who can do that, any writer who can do that, I genuinely do have to applaud, because that's a very hard thing to do. Because I think murder mystery and the crime genre is such a very hard genre to write. I'm even writing my own crime novel, and it's really hard to do. Like, I have tons of ideas about where I want the plot to go, but I am also very worried because I feel very intimidated whenever I read novels by J.K. Rowling, because I feel like she does it so well and she can make it look so easy. And even novelists that I love as well, like Stephen King and J.K. Rowling, they make it look so easy making these decisions, making all these plot twists and all these other things, but it's actually very difficult and it takes a lot of thought. So I am very happy to see that J.K. Rowling was able to really kind of pull this off and really make a novel that really makes you second guess yourself and makes you think, oh, it could be this person, but it's actually that person. And it was just a very fantastic read. It was wonderful. And I actually really do like a lot of the side characters. We have an agent who is pretty much bitter. She's a person who kind of, does care about own crime, but she really is kind of frustrated because he's one of those people who would quite happily, throw her name in the mud if he ever got the chance. There's a publicist or a novelist who is kind of commenting on the fact that he's a character featured in this very poison pen manuscript, and he's kind of, commenting on, there's a foreword that he puts into the manuscript that says, oh, look how magnanimous I am in this role as this, disgusting looking creature. Isn't that, hilarious kind of thing? And I really do like certain details like that. Like there are people in this book that even in the publishing industry are still trying to say that, oh, I'm angry at this, but I'm clearly also very happy at this as well. Like, I'm very happy that, this person's acknowledged my existence, kind of thing. And it's kind of that kind of behaviour that I really just love, and that's where a lot of the comedy is, I think, where I think a lot of the humour is mostly at how fake certain people can be and how incredibly two-faced they can be, and how they can be, really, oh, we love you one minute, but then they'll also say, oh, he's a terrible person who will happily throw you under the bus at any minute. And it's a really great examination of that kind of industry, even though it is considerably smaller than the industry that we explored in the last book, the fashion industry and the world of celebrity. I feel like this one did such a good job of depicting that world and depicting it as kind of a cutthroat world as well. So I thought that was very clever, and I'm looking forward to checking out more books in the series. And I just want to leave this book by I actually talk about Robin first, because I did say I was going to talk about Cormoran and then Robin, but then I left out Robin. Robin does a lot more in this book. She has a lot more, moments where she can shine as a detective. Like, she notices certain details that Strike just doesn't notice sometimes. She has a very active role in the plot, but she's also having a very difficult married life because she's married to Matthew. Anyone who is married to Matthew is honestly going to have their work cut out for them. But yeah, I really did feel sorry for her in this particular case, because she is trying to make it work, and she's in this position in her life where she's married and she feels like she's made a mistake. She feels like she's had a really difficult life, and not a difficult life, but she feels like she's had a very difficult time of it since leaving university, and something happened to her during her university years that I'm not going to go into now, because that's for the next book, Career of Evil, which I'll go into then. But I feel really sorry for Robin in this episode, because she really is trying to make this relationship that clearly is doomed for failure work, and she is trying to try to please Matthew by trying to do more temp jobs and trying to do more jobs in analysing or whatever that particular job was. But she just doesn't feel very happy. She wants to do this job because she really loves it, and when you're in a job that you really love, but then people are trying to say that, oh, you want to do something that's proper, you should do something that's proper, that's a very relatable thing. I haven't personally gone through it, but I know people who have, and that's a very sad thing when that happens, because you really do want to please everybody. You want to please the person who's telling you should do this proper thing, but then in your heart that you probably should do something that you really love. And that's an incredibly relatable thing, and I really do feel that Robin really had a lot to think about in this particular instalment in regards to her relationship with Matthew. And I really do think that he's still an arsehole. He's still a absolute pleb. And I can't wait for her to dump his arse in 2 books' time. So yeah, I absolutely loved the Silkworm. I couldn't say too much about it because my memory is quite hazy on details of the book. There are details that I do remember quite vividly, but then there are certain details that I might have missed, and there are obviously details in this book that I have deliberately left out because I want people to actually read these books. So yeah, that's my review for The Silkworm, and I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's a fantastic read. It's got great plot twists, wonderful character development, and wonderful characterization. And I just love these books because of how they take the private detective and they allow him access into these very interesting worlds, like the world of the fashion industry, like the world of the publishing industry. And I always look forward to, even with the new books, I'm always looking forward to what J.K. Rowling is going to do with her characters next. Like which industry is she going to explore? Which other area of modern life is she going to explore? Like in the latest book, the 6th book, The Ink Black Heart, she tackles the world of social media, and in the previous book before that, Troubled Blood, she explored the medical industry. So I am actually very interested to see where she's going to go for the next 4 or 5 books, because we're on book 7 coming up. So yeah, she's going to have 10 books. She says she has 10 books on the table, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where she goes next. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this review. This has been my review for The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. And I hope you're all having a very good day. Take care. Bye-bye for now. This has been Josh with Whimsical and Interesting Musings. Take care. Bye-bye for now.